Well, Jason, I would like to thank you for appearing on Command Opera and doing the Skype interview on the Figaro. Now, I understand that your performance begins in the next few days, I believe towards the end of this coming week, at the Madison Opera in Figaro, which is what we're going to be talking about here. Can you tell us how it's going over there in Madison?
It's going very well. I'm very blessed to be surrounded by a lot of really talented and excited colleagues. And A. Scott Perry, who's directing it, has, I think, a very clear vision of how he wants it to be, which is great because on a relatively short rehearsal schedule, that's very important to have some clarity as to what the through line is for the production. Yeah, we're very excited. We get into the theater today, actually, so we're going to be looking at the set for the first time and this sort of thing. So we've got just a little less than a week to put this thing together on the stage.
Have you worked with this particular set, this production, before in another theater?
No, first time. First time.
Oh, first time.
It's a glimmer glass set, they say, and the sketches are beautiful. I'm really excited to see it.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about the opening night that's coming up. Now, that is what evening?
It's Friday night.
It's Friday night, eh? Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about the theater. I know about this theater in Madison. I understand it's huge and it's beautiful. Not what I was expecting from Madison, Wisconsin, but there you are.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the theater itself.
Apparently, from what I've heard, is there was a very generous donation made by one of the locals here, who I guess was giving back to the community and donated some $200 million towards this venue. Having just seen the theater for the first time this morning, was walking into it. It's a beautiful space, about 2,200 seats, which is where we'll be performing. They also, in this venue, have a black box theater, a children's theater, a smaller, more chamber-oriented theater. So there's a lot of, and as well as an art gallery as well. So there's a lot going on in this city block downtown.
Wow. It sounds like a very impressive theater. Now let's move on directly to the work, and let's talk about the Nozze in relationship to Barber of Seville, and let's put the two of them together. Now, Barber of Seville, Barbiere, was the Rossini work, has the same characters within the frame of the story as does Nozze. Now, Mozart, in your opinion, because I know you're familiar with both of the works, how do you feel Mozart was able to take the characters from the Rossini work and give the continuity?
Well, obviously, Rossini and Mozart being different styles of numerous sorts, it's neat to see actually the evolution of them. Whereas the Rossini tends to be a little more, in a sense, sometimes unbelievably comic, sort of slapstick, more or less. Whereas the Mozart, here we see all the characters developed a few years later. There's a little more maturity to them and a little more raw, honest, real character that you find in the Mozart, and Mozart captures that very well. I think it works well in comparing the two, in the sense that the characters, 3 or 4 years earlier in Barbiere, by the time they get the Mozart, yes, the Count and Countess now, Rosina, have been together a few years, and in the story of Le Nozze, you sort of see these marital problems coming about, which of course you have more the naive and fluffy color of the Barber. So it's interesting to see how the characters have developed, but also the way the music is set by Mozart and the libretto, just really brilliantly done. And I think that's what I find most effective with the Mozart opera, is that it's very real and honest, and there's no, I mean, it's comedy, but it's also very serious drama, placed just next to each other, because it's real life in a lot of ways, and I think Mozart captures that very well.
Now let's talk about Figaro, the character itself, and how do you see Figaro?
Yeah. Well, let's see, what I enjoy about playing Figaro is that he's very quick on his feet, maybe more so than I am in real life, so it's kind of nice to play someone who is as smart and quick as he is. yeah, very clever. He's sort of been on his own his whole life. So in The Barber, we find this guy who'll do anything for a buck. Uh, Dabbles in just about everything, and yeah, whatever can earn a dollar for him, he'll do. And what we find in the Figaro, the Mozart opera, we have that he's fallen in love with somebody, and maybe for the first time that he's actually given himself over to somebody. And you see this juxtaposition of who he is with who he wants to be, and there's a lot of restraint in the Figaro, in Le Nozze. I have to distinguish the two, with Susanna, because she really reins him in a lot of ways, and it is also a beat ahead of him most of the time. He finally has found someone who matches wits with him, and quite honestly, sort of has the upper hand in a lot of cases. So she's constantly telling him to calm down, use your head, quit acting so irrationally, whatever. So he's reining it in a lot, and it's neat to see how this relationship goes, because just when he's about to boil over, she says, you know, calm it, and
so let's go into Susanna a little bit, and the relationship itself. Now, obviously, he's in love with her very much, and there's a very deep relationship that is developed there. Would you suggest that there is, you know, in most relationships when they begin and they're heading towards marriage, there is a great deep sort of love which wears off after a number of years. They're in the early part of this relationship, and how do you get the interaction going? How do you establish the interaction on the stage with Susanna in the first act with the duet Sen che dieci, 20, 30, 5, 10, 20, 30?
I think it's important. You do sort of see the through line in the opera of all the emotions involved in this relationship, but from the get-go, from when the curtain rises, you definitely need to see the physical attraction and relationship between the two of them. He's measuring the space where they're going to put their wedding bed, and obviously there's all that excitement about finally the consecration of this relationship on wedding night, and so there's that, and there has to be just a light and fluffy and infatuated energy between the two early on. But then what you see develop, even in some glimpses of that time, is because they're so real and honest people in general, they just call it like they see it. You see some deeper lying relationship aspects, which I don't know, take the characters a little deeper. So later on in the opera, you really see the heartbreak that happens between them, because they are really in love.
Well, that brings us into the Count, obviously, and because Susanna is quite bothered by you know, the Count and his suggestive entreaties towards her, and you know, back in those days, there was a feudal right of that sometimes was exercised, where well, how do I put this in the correct fashion for public domain? Whereas, you know, the Count would be the first to know Susanna, shall I say. And this is something that's irritating her and is seriously outraging Figaro. And this sets to me the premise as to how the actual story that underlines the entire story and all of its subplots. Now, how do you convey that level of outrage and livid so that it underlines the work?
Well, gosh, there's a lot to that. What is so fascinating also in a historical context about Le Nozze di Figaro, about the plays in general, is that historically speaking, there's a revolution going on, and you see this battle of powers that's going on. And yeah, the feudal right of the master to be the first to have the newlywed bride within his or shall I say, yes. So the Count, actually, in a pledge to the Countess, says, "I'm going to waive this right," and this is a really big deal. And Figaro, thinking that yes, the Count is my friend. I mean, in the Barber of Seville, I mean, as part of getting Rosina in the first place, they really sort of palled it up. And this part of the story that's not told is obviously the two went together, and the Count took Figaro with him as his number one guy, and there's an assumed relationship there between the Count and the Figaro that Figaro takes very personally, and it's a friendship of sorts, maybe the closest friend he's got. What happens in Le Nozze di Figaro is the Count regrets his decision to waive this feudal right, and what then ensues is, for Figaro, as much as the insult that Susanna might even go through with this, is the fact that the Count has violated the bro code, as you say. Like, it's one thing for a woman to do that, but we have a relationship, the Count and I, and how dare he do this to me? So yes, the infuriating nature of this. I want to kill him, to be honest with you. But of course, with Susanna's help, and also with me going, no, what is the best approach to dealing with this situation? Requires a lot of restraint, and I think that's what adds the extra dimension to Figaro, which makes it very interesting. Otherwise, by the end of Act 1, Figaro's going to run off and kill the Count. But no, he just says, use your head, Figaro, and let's see if you can match wits with him and beat him at his own game somehow.
At